So it's my pleasure to introduce Yehuda Lindell today. Yehuda is the head of cryptography at Coinbase and previously CEO at Unbound. He's also a professor on leave at Bar-Ilan University. Yehuda has been working on MPC for a long, long while. He's, for example, an inventor of one of the fastest protocols for threshold TCDSA signing for two parties. I think it's kind of was record-breaking at the time. I don't know if that still holds its record. Potentially, it's super fast and efficient. Yehuda is also co-author with Jonathan Katz of a book, Introduction to Modern Cryptography, which some of you might have read. It's an amazing starter for those who want to do cryptography, want to learn about it. It's super simple and clear, but at the same time very rigorous and formal. And I think they keep updating the book, and now it's third edition from 2020. So you can also find new stuff in there. I think it covers cryptography from 1980s up to the modern day. And we are very fortunate to have Yehuda. He will give two talks here. And the first one is more high level about his experience bringing academic research into deployment and production at Coinbase.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for having me. So my talk is going to be in two parts. The first, I'm going to talk about my experiences with commercialization of MPC at Unbound Security. And the second part, I'll talk about deployment of cryptography at Coinbase. And the theme together is bringing advanced cryptography or recent results into deployment, into actual commercialization, and the challenges that arise with that. I like interaction, so please feel free to stop, to ask, to challenge. That makes it much more interesting for everyone. Okay, so the first part is going to be my startup journey. It's my experience at Unbound Security. The thing about startups is that every startup is completely different, and all experiences are very, very different. So there are things that we can learn, but there are no hard and fast rules. If there were, then doing startups would be easy. I could just give you a rule book, Andreessen Horowitz would give you a rule book, and we'd all be done. But the whole point of startups is that they disrupt, they do something different, and therefore they all need to be dealt with differently. One of the interesting questions is a second-time startup CEO better than a first-time startup? So the second time, you've already learned a lot, right? So you have experience. That's true, but there are also dangers. Do you fall in the trap of interpreting everything for your second startup to work the same way as your first startup? And if you do, then you're probably going to fail because, again, each startup is completely different. Okay, so the start of the story is the maturing of technology or science, starting as pure theory, over decades maturing to something that can actually be used in practice. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. But when that happens, how do you deal with that? How do you actually now take that science that you've built, that you've worked on, and get it into industry when industry isn't really aware of it? So sometimes something already is being used. Zero knowledge now in the blockchain space is very well understood and known. You have some breakthrough in zero knowledge that has real measurable practical benefits. That's not such a challenge today. It's still a challenge. Everything's a challenge, but it's even a bigger challenge if you're doing something brand new that nobody knows about and now you want to commercialize that. What's technology? By the dictionary definition at least, the study and knowledge of the practical, especially industrial use of scientific discovery. So we research for many, many years. We start with theory. Maybe it starts becoming a little bit more efficient, but completely impractical. Then more efficient, then more efficient. And at some point we say, yes, this is now technology. It can be used for practical use. I believe that the world can benefit from this technology, but how do I get it out there? As I mentioned, if it's already recognized, that's much easier. If I've come up with a new and better medicine for Alzheimer's, we don't have to convince anybody of the importance of that. It's very easy for industry to recognize that. That's also, by the way, why you'll see in universities, the tech transfer from biology and chemistry is typically quite easy. The research in the lab has been done, has been brought to a certain point. An external company will come and say, yes, I'm interested in that, and it's done. You don't have to do necessarily the work to push it out yourself, but in computer science, it's often very, very different. This science is sort of locked in academia. We know about it, we've been doing it, and nobody knows about it. We'd like to say, world, look, we have this great, shiny new thing, come and take it, but it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen for a few reasons. Firstly, they don't know about it. And raising your hand in university and saying, I have this great result, it was in ACM CCS and got the best paper award and it's going to solve the world hunger, that is not going to be very successful. More importantly, in academia, we often don't know how to choose, really understand the use cases where it's actually beneficial. We have an idea that it can be very beneficial, that it can solve certain problems, but we don't actually really understand industry's problems that they're trying to solve. If they understood our technology, they could come up with really good use cases of where it's useful, but they don't know about our technology. So we don't know how to go and tell them, you know that problem you have, we can solve that for you, because we're not in that world. And in fact, you'll often see that very successful entrepreneurs coming out doing, for example, a startup in that disrupts something in the brain to fintech. These are people who have often worked in banks and seen that something doesn't work. They understand the problem before they even start, and now they have a better solution. But when you're in a different world and you're not aware of that, it's very hard to convince someone about why it's important. A second problem is that at this point of the journey from science to technology, the solution, although it might be efficient enough to use in practice, it's not something which is an off-the-shelf technology which you can just say, take and use as a black box. It typically requires great expertise to deploy, to customize to the use case that you're dealing with. And this is, I think we're all familiar with MPC and zero knowledge today. These are not things that if you don't know anything about cryptography, here there's a new zero knowledge system, just take it and run it as a black box and everything is fine. It typically just doesn't work that way. Another thing to notice is, okay, so you've done this science and you think you've come up with something which is really beneficial. Some academics are looking to go and commercialize. They want to open a startup. They actually really want to do that. This is what they're looking to do. And some others are not. People ask me for many, many years, with what you do, all the privacy things, don't you want to open a startup? I said, no, I'm a happy academic. But things change. I've been out for quite a few years now. Okay, so challenges of the early days. When we started in 2015, the big question is, what is MPC? Nobody has ever heard of it. There are thousands of papers since the late 80s about this topic, both the theory and the practice of it, but nobody knows what it is. And in fact, it sounds like snake oil, and we actually had people telling us, we don't believe you. Like, it's not possible, it cannot be possible to compute on data without actually seeing it. How can you even do that? And that's one of the biggest challenges in the early days. How do you overcome that problem? The first actually interesting is that academic reputation actually does help a lot. So in some sense, we feel like we're talking in a vacuum, but when you have an academic reputation and it's significant, then it gives you at least the benefit of the doubt. Another thing is, I wrote the textbook with Jonathan Katz that Lyra mentioned because when we started teaching, we didn't have any book that we felt we could teach from. But it turns out that this was actually really helpful in Unbound's journey because there are multiple times when we went into a meeting, and in the meeting there are technologists, there are engineers, and there are maybe business development people or other people, and someone there had taken a course in university in cryptography which had used my textbook. So automatically it was like, okay, we're not going to believe everything you say, but you have credibility, and that's very, very helpful. And the reason why that's very helpful and very important, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in this slide, is that there is so much noise. There are so many different competing products. There are so many vendors claiming so many different things that organizations need some way to differentiate between what's real and what's not real, what's vague promises and something which is real technology, and this can help them. The second thing you need to do is educate the market. Today, actually, if you go out, people know about MPC, not just in the blockchain world. It's not like they know about it like TLS, but people know about MPC, they've heard of MPC, they know what it can do, and that's very important when you want to start the process of selling to organization. One of the very important things in startups is, okay, I've been given an investment. I now have to hit certain milestones before the next investment. But if I have to educate the market in order to hit those milestones, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to sell, that's going to take much longer. And you have to factor that in. So what is MPC? Is it real? Is it based on, is it like a newfangled technology which we don't really understand, or is it really based on something that we have a good understanding of? Can we trust it? Can we trust you in deploying this technology? All of these questions are very, very important. You have to educate the market before you can really do very much. There are always outlier early adopters. There are some organizations who that's part of their culture. They like to adopt brand new technology, but you need to sell to the masses. You need to sell a lot, and you can't rely on them for hitting all your milestones. Certification like FIPS or common criteria. At Unbound, we were selling software that protects keys via MPC rather than in hardware. That was the basic idea. FIPS is a certification which is for cryptography modules, cryptographic modules. So doing the standard cryptographic operations, AES, RSA, ECDSA, and so on and so forth. And you can certify this module. Very often, cryptographers or scientists look at these certifications sort of with a bit of scorn, because we know that they don't really guarantee high security. It just basically says that you do what you claim you do. You're actually computing ECDSA. Maybe at higher levels, it has some basic side channel protections. It tells you that you're authenticating or administering these things, you're managing them in an appropriate way. But for industry, they're very, very important. It's a sanity check. And again, we need to differentiate between the noise, between what's fake, between what's real. There are also different levels of FIPS. FIPS 1 is very basic. FIPS level 2 adds additional controls, and level 3 and 4 are only for hardware. So we did FIPS level 2. And just to illustrate why this was important, we had one customer, very, very significant customer, who was doing code signing for a very large software company who was using us for their code signing globally. And it was a contract of over $1 million a year. And they withheld payment until we got level 2 certification, because we told them we're getting level 2 certification, and it always takes a long time in these standards bodies. And until we got it, even though they were already using the software, they had withheld part of the payment. It was very, very important to them. So that's a sign that this is worth doing. And there are things like analysts like Gartner. I don't know if everybody has heard of them, but Gartner analysts, they look at the market, they describe what's happening in the market, they describe trends, technological trends, but also what different companies are doing. And sometimes this feels outrageous. We have literally thousands of papers in academic journals and conferences over 30 to 40 years, and what you care about is some analyst who doesn't really understand the technology, doesn't know anything close to what we know in academia, and that's who you're relying on to say this is legitimate? And the answer is yes, because once again, in industry, I want to buy a product. I certainly do not have the time, or even probably not the capability of going and looking at all of this science, understanding what happens. I need someone to tell me in a very quick way, does this make sense? Is this beneficial? Yes.
So you mentioned probably your early customers were these places that, adopted new technology. And do you think those people cared about what Gartner was saying?
The very early adopters, if you have someone very technologically aligned inside, possibly less, but it is important for them because you might be working at a company which is very innovative, and you'll come along and say, yes, we should buy this, but you also have to convince the others in your organization. You have to convince your manager or your manager's manager and you have to have procurement on board, and they want to understand whether we should be buying from this company. It's very interesting if you think about it that in the startup world, a company of 30 to 40 people can sell critical infrastructure software to massive banks and companies. You typically would think maybe we should be buying from such a small organization. So they need to get very high confidence that this is legit, that we can trust them, that they're going to be around. It's not so simple. And having analyst validation will also help them.
So, essentially you have to pay for that analyst, right? Like you buy some subscription and it's one of those quid pro quo.
Pay to
things.
play is called.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's why for us it feels outrageous. Like, I mean, why are you trusting or believing this analyst when it's all a game? So the analyst will claim, of course, that even if you pay and even if you're involved, it doesn't mean that we're going to just sign off on anything.
But if you don't pay, they definitely won't sign, right? Like,
they won't talk about you, probably. I don't know too much about the exact details. So if anyone from Gartner watching this talk should not come and sue me. But yes, it's sort of, it's not this objective market research. Yeah, there is a pay-to-play element. But it's important. And Gartner, for example, has this thing called a hype cycle, which you can see over here, and it has different parts of the cycle, so innovation trigger, and a peak of inflated expectations, a trough of disillusionment, and then it goes up in the slope of enlightenment and real utility. And this is from 2020. You can see that secure multi-party computing is at like the height of the inflated expectations on the hype cycle. Whether that makes sense or not, it doesn't really matter. But for us, we could go in. This was a really important slide to our customers because we're in a pitch, we're showing them this is real. Here you can see that this is secure multi-party computing they wrote is a legitimate, well-known technology. We're part of the process of getting it out into industry and so on and so forth.
doesn't this graph make you upset? I mean, why is there a shape like this? Why are, where are they, what process are they using to like put the dots on the x-axis?
Yes, you're a scientist, I can tell. And I have a slide later on about scientists doing startups, and this is one of the challenges, which is how do you deal with these things which are completely non-scientific or don't, I mean, this is what they put, all technologies they claim go through this type of hype cycle. I don't really care. I care that it's there and therefore that I can use this as a tool. That's the way that I look at it. Is it perfect? Does it make sense? Is it right? I care that I'm there. I care that there's another Gartner report talking about data protection, and it mentions secure multi-party computing and Unbound Security as one of the major vendors who's supplying solutions like that. That's what I care about. There are many things which are interesting, right? So I had a few years, maybe 5 years after Unbound was already running, I had someone tell me in a meeting, MPC is a buzzword. And I wasn't sure whether to be happy or insulted. I mean, on the one hand, it's great. People know about MPC. 5 years ago, nobody knew what this thing was, right? But it's a buzzword. It's sort of like, I don't know. Anyway, okay, so we need to overcome this challenge of bringing this technology out, and then there are numerous steps. The steps that I want to talk about are firstly understanding the problem that you solve and who you sell to. The second, finding what they call the value proposition. Third, determining the compelling event. I'll discuss each of these. There are also things around product market fit and focus, which I won't talk about because they're very generic for, I think, all startups. So I don't think I have too much that's specific to say about it, but I have slides at the end in case there's time and interest. We can talk about them as well. Okay, so let's start with what problem do you solve and building a scalable product. First important thing is the distinction between a product and a project. So in the early days I'm bringing this technology out, and I have a customer who's interested in doing something with this technology. Is that interest going to improve my existing product, or is this going to be a very specific project to them? And here's an example. So I'm a company who uses MPC technology in order to protect cryptographic keys. And now one of the car manufacturers reaches out and says, we want to use MPC as part of, for doing authentication for getting into the car. So I want to just come and the car will see my face and we'll just open the door. But there are privacy issues, so I want to use MPC. Do I say yes or do I no? It's a massive car manufacturer. This could be significant money. It's very good to show to investors, maybe, but it's not really in my line of business. So I can lie to myself mainly and say, one thing, it's authentication. Authentication is cryptography. So that's fine. We're protecting cryptographic keys. Here, the cryptographic key is your face. It's your biometric. Okay, this is in line with our business. But that's a lie. This is not a repeatable product that we're going to be selling unless we say we're moving to solve a completely different problem. But then each customer that comes and is interested in something different is pushing us. It's like a boat on the rough seas going in all directions, because each time it's being pushed in a different way. So you need to, all products need customization in the beginning, because you're building a product and now you have customers that say, okay, but in order to use that, okay, so I see you have this thing that protects keys and you manage the keys, but in order for me to deploy that, I have a policy that administrators have to log in using their organization credentials, so you need to support that via, for example, OpenID Connect. Okay, that's some sort of customization. It's not really customization. This is something that makes sense that many organizations would want, and therefore, yes, we'll do that. But there are requests when you hear them that you say, no, actually, this is something that I think is specific, maybe specific to you, and it's very hard to know which it is. And in fact, there are startups that fail because their first very big customer that they thought was typical was actually the outlier. So here, I want to do this thing. It sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I'm a very big bank. I'm sure other banks want it, but no other banks are interested. And then you've spent the first 2 years or year and a half building very much towards this one very big customer, but you can't sell it to anyone else and you run out of money. So that's a danger. I guess maybe I'll take a step back and say, what's the difference in a startup and any other company? What's the difference in a startup and opening a pharmacy or opening a furniture store? The difference is scale. Startups are supposed to grow very, very quickly, and get to a point where you can return your investment money either via IPO or via an acquisition. In order to do that, so that's one difference. And the second difference, so you need very fast growth, but the question is also, why do you need such fast growth? Because in the software world, if you do something very interesting, but you grow slowly and you don't capture the market, then somebody else, a large company, will see that you're doing something very interesting and will just do it faster than you. So what you need to actually do is get to a point where you've already captured market, enough of the market that you're a leader, before anyone else realizes that they should be copying you. And in order to get to fast growth, you need to be able to build a product and sell it to many, many organizations, the same product. If you need a large percentage of your work is customizing your product for each different customer, that's going to make it very, very hard for you to scale. And if you're building a different product for each customer, then you're a project company, which is nice. You can make very good money with a project company. But this is not going to be a startup which will scale and get exponential growth. And I am enough of a scientist that when I say exponential growth, I mean it, doubling every year. You're not going to get there if you have to do too much customization. You need a scalable product. So as I said, our focus on Unbound Security was key protection and management. This is an existing problem with an existing budget. And that's important because it's much easier to sell to an organization when they recognize the problem and they already have a budget to solve that problem. Now you're just asking them to spend that budget on a different product because you're supposedly much better than the existing products. For example, in the privacy world, it's much, much harder. And there are startups using MPC in order to obtain privacy, whether it be different organizations collaborating. There is no existing budget. Organizations maybe have a problem, but those problems are different across different organizations, and the challenges are much, much harder. But unless you do the work to try and get there, you won't solve that either. So repeatable use case. What is a use case? Repeatability is something that I can sell to many people. What I mean by a use case. And here, we often think that, okay, protection of cryptographic keys, that's a use case. It's very well defined, right? There are cryptographic keys I use for all different things. I want to protect them. Here, that's a use case. No, that's not a use case. That's a very generic category. Better machine learning for image analysis is not a use case. It's a technological statement. A use case is replacing smart cards that are used for authentication with MPC on your mobile phone. Whether it's a good use case or not, I'm not commenting, but that's a very specific use case. It talks about authentication. It talks about authentication from a mobile and using a smart card and replacing a smart card. It's not, for example, not using a YubiKey or UBHSM, but using MPC instead on your mobile. It's very well defined. Better machine learning to detect flaws in a production plant. Actually, after I read this slide, I think it's not true. That's not a use case. Because a production plant for the car industry and for silicon in building computer chips or for For medicine, these are very, very, very different. A use case would be better ML to detect flaws in chip manufacturers, for example. That's a very specific, that's a use case that you can use. Why is it important to have a repeatable specific use case? Because you need to sell and market your product. And you need to have a very good understanding of who's buying that product in order to know who to market to. If I'm trying to sell to everybody, then I'm selling to no one. I'm not a global organization with thousands of salespeople and marketing professionals. I have very limited resources. I have to know exactly who I'm speaking to. And also to educate my salespeople. And if I'm doing everything, then it's very, very hard for them to learn. They don't, like for us, code signing, it's obvious, right? Very, very simple. Or database encryption, it's very simple. But if I'm doing code signing and database encryption and 15 other things, then it's very hard for our salespeople to even understand what we're doing. One note which is important here is the double-edged sword of deep technology. It's for investors, it's actually good to see deep tech. They see there's an advantage here, and that's something which can be very beneficial. But we can often make the mistake that better technology is what makes the company win. And I'm convinced that better technology or say it the other way around, poorer technology with better business execution will almost always win. So I have a company using MPC to protect keys. Somebody else comes along and does the same thing, but they're only using semi-honest adversaries. They're not doing malicious adversaries. And their protocols are very naive. They're slower than ours. And I'm not even sure they're very secure, but will customers know the difference? Not necessarily. If they have better business execution, better marketing, better sales, better processes, then it's likely that they're going to win. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have good technology. I'm convinced that having good technology is an advantage, but it's an advantage when you have very, very good business execution and not when you don't. The other problem with technology is we tend to focus on it. So we come and say, here we do MPC, we have this novel, great way with new science on how to protect your keys. But the truth is that the technology underneath the hood isn't really what people care about. They care about how does it help them in their business. What benefit does it give them? What ROI or return on investment does it give them to buy your product? And on the one hand, it might sound obvious. Obviously, the technology is there just to make a better product, but it's the technology that's a differentiator. So how can I not talk about the technology? What am I doing if I'm not talking about the technology? That's actually what gives me the advantage over the others. And that's a trap that we often fall into. And especially when with something in the security and cryptography world, the big question is, can you demonstrate the benefit that you're providing? Or the ROI, which is return on investment. So if I just say, yeah, this is more secure than what you have now. Okay, what does that mean? How much more secure? Can you give me something measurable to understand that I'm going to actually benefit, I'm going to save money from this? What is it that you're doing that is better for me? And this is why it's often easy to do a startup that, for example, does anomaly detection. Because for anomaly detection, what I can do is I come in, I connect to your network, and I show you, look at all of these things that are happening. You can actually see. You're using anomaly detection, right? But you didn't detect these different things. But I'm doing something which is cryptographic. Like, how can I demonstrate anything? Can you say that? Can you show me that and it gets even worse when so companies try to deal with this. They say things like, if you would have used our solution, then this breach wouldn't have happened. It's a really, really bad thing to say. It pisses everybody off. Don't do that. You don't know. You can't say whether it would have prevented or not, right? You can argue that it can help, but it's very hard to demonstrate ROI for something which is just preventing a breach and not, for example, detecting afterwards, which can be easy to do. So this is one of the biggest challenges that we had as well. So I want to give you an example about this idea of how we describe the benefit that we're giving or what we're actually solving through, for example, with zero knowledge, not MPC. So I've come up with a better zero knowledge proof system. I haven't, okay? But let's say I have. So it's a better zero knowledge proof system. The question that we're all going to ask is, in what way is it better? So there are multiple ways. It could be more secure. So it has better assumptions and a security model. First is, will anyone even understand that? And secondly, do they care? Do organizations have a problem with the security model, the assumptions used in existing zero-knowledge systems or proof systems that they can choose off that are already out there? Probably not. I can also say it's more secure because there's no trusted setup needed, and that can be helpful because now maybe I needed to do some ceremony to set something up, and now I don't. That actually could be something attractive, but you have to understand who you're selling to. Let's say I'm using this zero-knowledge scheme internally in my bank for something. Well, if it's internally in my bank, then I can do a trusted setup myself on a laptop which is brand new and is only used for that, has never been connected to the internet, and nobody has to trust me because I do trust myself. So that means that this tells me what type of organization I should be targeting. Okay, now the more obvious is I have a fast approver or a faster verifier. Now I have to understand who's paying for this product and who's going to gain from it. So a fast approver maybe means I'm going to save you on GPU costs or cloud costs for computing the proof. Or faster verifier means that I'm going to save you gas fees for verifying in the blockchain space. The nice thing about the blockchain space is actually give a very, very clear number for the ROI on a faster verifier. I can say, okay, for these types of transactions, I can look back over the past year on the blockchain, see how many transactions of this type were carried out, how much they cost in gas fees, and this is how much it will cost using my proof system. So if you're expecting to do this much, this is how much your ROI is, so I'm going to charge you whatever I'm going to charge you. Most products are not that clean. It's much harder to justify, okay, so I'm going to sell you something that protects keys, you're using hardware now, this will save you money in the long run because you won't have to buy new hardware, but I already have hardware now. Or it's going to be, if I go for the more secure, then I'm going to say, okay, but how much money have I lost in my organization because of this attack before? Am I really expecting to lose money in the future from this? It becomes very, very vague and very, very difficult. So now we understand our product, we understand our use case, we know who we're selling to. Now we need to understand, okay, so that will automatically lead us to who our target market is. And I want to give a couple of examples. So one example is smart card replacement. So we have a UBHS, YubiKey for authentication, and I'll say, no, you can use a mobile. And this is great because people forget their YubiKeys at home, people lose them, they're very expensive, and this is much, much easier for use. And I want to sell to the US because most startups, it's best to start in the US market. Anybody know why? Why is it best to start in the US market? Why do Israeli startups start in the US market?
Capital gains tax laws.
Nah.
The availability
Capital
of capital?
gains tax laws are much better in Israel than the US, actually.
The availability of capital.
No, I'm talking who to sell to. I'm not talking where I'm building my company. I'm talking about who do I sell to. I'm going to sell to the US market. It's one market with one language in pretty much one location. You go to Europe, there's UK and France and Germany and Denmark and Belgium. They're all different languages, often many different cultures, different regulations. It's much harder to penetrate a market
China's
like
the
that.
best market then.
In some ways, yes. So I want to sell my solution for smart card replacement in the US. Is it a good idea? What do you think? Sounds good or not? Sounds good. Okay. How many smart cards do you have in your bag?
One.
No, real smart cards like UBHSM, YubiKey. You have two. Okay, you're unusual. How many YubiKeys or smart cards do most people in the US have? Zero, because the US market doesn't use them. They're used in enterprise settings. So for enterprise employees, this can certainly be something, but that's a pretty small market, and it's a very hard market to get into because it's already been captured. But if you go to Brazil or you go to Asia, then in some countries in Asia, people walk around with multiple one-time password devices for logging in because their bank requires them to, because there's much more fraud in the banks and there's less of a focus on usability. So people actually have much more. So this is not a very good thing if my aim is to sell B2B2C, so I want to sell to banks for their customers to secure their login, the US market is probably not a very good idea. So I have to understand, once I understand my use case, what I'm trying to do, then I have to ask, is that good for my target market, or where should my target market be? Another question is sophisticated versus unsophisticated. So Unbound was protecting keys in software using MPC. Okay, shall we sell that to hospitals or healthcare or education? What about education? Schools and universities can protect their data using our system. Probably not, because a lot of those organizations are very, very immature in their security posture. They may not even be encrypting. If you're not even encrypting yet, then turn on TDE, transparent database encryption. Just turn it on. It's very, very easy. Just do that. A lot of them aren't even doing that. Our solution is one which requires more sophistication. You need to deploy multiple nodes, like two servers for MPC. You need to be able to transition your existing solutions. So you need a sophisticated customer. We chose the financial sector and very large technology companies because they're sophisticated and they truly care about security. If you as a company, and if you're in healthcare, you care about HIPAA. But what do you care about in HIPAA? Do you really care that your customer data is safe? Or do you care that you fulfill the regulation? If you care that you fulfill the regulation only, and the regulation doesn't require you to use this more complicated solution, then you're not going to buy a more complicated solution. But if you're a bank, then you truly care. Typically, banks truly care that money is not stolen. That customer data being stolen from a bank is a very big hit in reputation, because customers expect the banks to keep their data safe. So the type of solution you have leads you to the type of customer that you need to take as well. Okay, what about the value proposition? What value am I bringing to you as an organization? It's very much not what we thought. We thought, okay, we're replacing hardware with software. We're going to be cheaper, more agile, faster to deploy. That's all true, but it didn't bring us to the compelling event, which I'll talk about in a minute, about why someone should buy right now. Because I already have this infrastructure. I already have this hardware. What's going to make me move over? And just being software wasn't enough. And also because the ROI, the return on investment, was unclear. Like, is it really going to be better? When is it going to save me money? If it's only going to save me money in 10 years' time, I'm not going to invest in that today. So in the end, our major value proposition was completely different. We talked about usability. Not usability of an end user, but for the organization, for the employees who need to manage this system. Orchestration, defragmentation, I'll show you that in a moment. MPC turned out to be an important part, but much smaller than we thought in the beginning. Because yes, everybody wanted to get rid of their HSMs. HSMs, remember what HSMs are? Hardware security modules. They're these physical boxes that provide physical protection of keys, a bit like James Bond stuff. If you open them up, then they get detected and it can completely self-destruct, some of them, or they're protected against side channel attacks. They're the industry standard for protecting keys. Not sure it makes that much sense today, because physical security, when you're using a secure data center, then it's completely different, but this is what people use. And everybody hates HSMs. I mean, literally everybody hates HSMs. We only had one meeting where the person said they didn't hate HSMs. It was at a very big bank in the US. And this very high manager said he hasn't heard of any problems with his HSM infrastructure. He doesn't think it's a problem at all. The next meeting was the person who reports to that manager, who actually runs the HSMs, and he spent the entire half hour swearing about how horrible HSMs are, and they don't work, and they don't interoperate. So he was very, very good at his job, and he didn't reflect to his manager how horrible HSMs are. So everybody hates them, and they wanted a vision of how they could get off them eventually, but it wasn't necessarily the highest priority to do right now. They had other priorities. Another thing that was a big value proposition in some cases, what we called key misuse resistance. So let's say example of code signing. Everyone know what code signing is used for? Every time you download an app, it's signed cryptographically to make sure that the update is indeed by the legitimate vendor. If you have a banking app and I can deploy a malicious update, then I can steal your money. Likewise, if I can download a fraudulent or a malicious operating system to your iPhone, I can completely destroy it or take control of it, and you can't even update. So this is something which is very, very important and very critical, but I don't need to steal your key your code signing key in order to win or succeed in my attack. All I need is to be able to sign on one transaction that it's fraudulent. Same thing with cryptocurrencies. If you have $1 million protected by your key, I don't need to steal your key. I just need to sign one transaction which transfers that $1 million to me. And so I need to prevent misuse. So if the key is in an HSM, it might be very well protected, and let's assume I can't steal it. But if I can access the machine that's enabled to ask the HSM to sign, then I'm done. Because I access that machine, I tell the HSM to sign on the fraudulent code, and I'm finished. So we actually did for one of our, it was in the process when we got acquired, so we didn't completely finish it. But one thing we had was before you sign on code or before you you finalize your code, you run static analysis, you run vulnerability scans on your code, and we were doing that at each MPC participant. At Unbound, we had 2 participants, and this would make it harder to bypass. Because if somebody changed the code, or wanted to change it on one of the machines, you'd have to actually breach 2 different machines. And if they're in different environments, maybe in different clouds, that would be much, much harder to do. So that was also a value proposition that we had. And a very important thing that someone said, Bob Blakely was an advisor. He was actually an investor of ours at Citibank. And his father is the Blakely secret sharing, by the way. So he's a cryptographer as well at Citibank. He was then. And he always said that it's much easier to sell a product that improves usability without sacrificing security than a product that improves security without sacrificing usability. Because improving security is not measurable. Improving usability is. Now, this may be disappointing because I'm a cryptographer. I want to make money with my company, of course, but I actually want to do good to the world. And so doing good for the world as a cryptographer means improving security. So I'm improving usability only. It's like a bit of a, or maybe if I'm really lucky, I can improve both, but it feels like a compromise. But anybody in the security world knows that one of the key elements to deploying better security is to have it to be very usable. When a product is not very usable, or when a security solution is not very usable, it's not deployed broadly. So improving usability without sacrificing security can do a lot to improve security of the world. But this is something which is much more easily measurable and therefore has more chance of succeeding. Okay, what about the compelling event? The compelling event is, what will I buy now? And the best way to explain this to academics is the following question. Who here has a whole pile of papers that they want to read? They have a long list. What makes you read that paper today? Right? I mean, yeah, I see your technology, it's great, it's very cool technology. This is much better than the HSMs that I have now. It's much, much easier to use. I'm convinced of its security. I'm convinced of its usability. It's great. But this is a massive infrastructure project. We now have to add another vendor to our list of vendors. We have to do the work of deploying this. We have to understand how it works. We have to start integration. We have to move existing products things that work and have been working for many years. We have to move into something new, and there's risk there. Yeah, okay, I love your technology. It's great. This is on our list on our bucket list of stuff that we want to try and do before we retire, and you don't close the deal. So why will I buy now? Why do people buy? Regulatory compliance. So very often people don't like regulation, it's a pain, but it's very, very beneficial in the security world because it's what makes people actually do things. So I want to go to the cloud. GDPR says I have to encrypt everything, or I have to have certain controls in place. And if I haven't done that, I now need to buy something to enable me to do that. Here, okay, that's a compelling event, I'll buy your product. You need to know to market to that. This changes your target market as well. Another thing is business enablement. We want to move to the cloud. There's already a business decision to do that because it saves money, but there are security concerns that arise around that. And so now I'm not selling you more security. I'm selling you the ability to go to the cloud. It's a completely different sale, a completely different pitch. Yes, you want to go to the cloud, but you have this problem for when you go to the cloud. How do you encrypt your data? Yes, you can use AWS KMS, but then you're locked into AWS. I can give you something which is cloud agnostic, and you can move to another cloud at no cost, and therefore you can be more cost effective. That's my pitch. It has nothing to do with security. Well, it does, because the enabler is the security. But the reason you're buying is not security. The reason you're buying is it enables you to solve a business problem that you want to solve. Immediate cost saving, but the immediate is often very, very hard. And company initiative. So we had, I mentioned beforehand, a very, very large global software company was using us for code signing across the organization. That company had code signing keys stolen, like code signing certificates stolen. In the industry world, a certificate is often what they call a private key. Don't ask, but they had code signing private keys stolen. And the chief information security officer said, there's a company initiative to clean up the code signing. We're not willing to have any more code signing keys sitting on developers' laptops across the company where we have no insight into what they're signing on, how they're managed, who has access. There's an initiative, a company initiative to have one central code signing solution. That organization therefore set up a team whose job was to do that, was to look around for a solution like ours. We were running a webinar on using Unbound Security for code signing. They signed up for the webinar, sent our marketing person in the middle of the webinar a message saying this is exactly what we're looking for, and that was an over $1 million a year deal. Again, there was a compelling event. There was a reason why they had to buy right now. So now I want to show you what we started with when we started Unbound and what we ended up with after learning all of these lessons. So this is what we started with. These are slides that we actually had for customers, and I want to stress that there's a difference between slides for customers and for investors. Right? Investors are interested in the technology. Customers are interested in the problem that you're solving for them. The investors also want to know that you know how to sell, so that's also important. But this is where we sold to customers. Okay, so we have technology for securing applications and data. We have strong scientific roots, deep research in computer science, cutting-edge research from secure multiple communication. Okay, but what are you doing? Okay, but this is the first slide. Here's the problem in the world. It's the data security center challenge. You have all of this data you need to protect, and there are all these different attackers coming everywhere, and this is not being met. Here there are all these breaches. So this is a really, really strange thing to do because we're trying to convince the customer that they have a security problem. Now, that may make sense, but for which type of customer do you need to convince they have a security problem? The sophisticated or the unsophisticated? Unsophisticated, because the sophisticated is one of two cases. Either they know they have a security problem, or they don't know, but then you're not going to convince them anyway because they think they understand, or they often do understand. But who is our solution suited for? The sophisticated or the unsophisticated? Sophisticated. So this is a complete waste of time. If I'm in a meeting, I told my salespeople, if you have to tell a customer that they have a problem, they're not our customer. Just forget it. It's not worth it. For Unbound, our customers are only those who are aware that they have a problem and they need to solve it. So these two slides are completely irrelevant. And then our fourth slide, here, how we do it. Decryption takes place without bringing the key together. It's never in any place to be stolen. Okay, but what benefit are you bringing me? This is the way we started. Okay, and now I'll get to the way we ended. Before that, what didn't we talk about? We didn't talk about the problem we're trying to solve. Or if we did, we said better security, but we already discussed as a big mistake. What benefits there are, why you should buy now. None of those things were in part of our pitch, and that's a massive mistake. This is what we ended up with. And we're talking about, again, our target market is big enterprises, large banks typically, or financials, and very large technology companies. So very, think large, think diverse. Okay, so there are many different environments. You have different clouds. You have different data centers. You need to migrate things between those different environments. There are many different key stores using. You have physical HSMs from different vendors that don't live nicely together. You may have cloud HSMs. You may have cloud KMSs and vaults, unprotected keys. There are different interfaces. Different applications will use different libraries when talking to those different key stores in order to use cryptography. And by the way, PKSS11, which is one of the oldest libraries for doing cryptography, will not actually be implemented exactly the same, even on different HSMs. And you have different cryptographic problems you're solving on top of all of those different things. So it's a massive mess. It's completely fragmented. Different problems being solved with different libraries on top of different key stores all in different environments. This raises management problems and how you use it, and existing infrastructure is rigid, too slow. I won't go through it all, but these are all the problems that you actually have. By the way, side note, in the last year, we had a number of meetings where someone came to the meeting and said, listen, before you give us your pitch, we want to show you what we're looking for. Let's not waste time. And they had 2 slides. The first slide showing their mess of infrastructure of everything all over the place, and the second slide with a unified solution for all of these different things. And then we said, okay, let's show you our slides, right? And then we showed them what we do, and this was like what you call product market fit, right? That you're actually solving a problem that people are already looking for. You're not trying to convince the world that this is what they should need. Steve Jobs can do that with an iPhone. I'm not Steve Jobs. I also don't have an iPhone to sell. So I need customers who already know what they're looking for, and I'm solving their problem that they're already trying to solve. So what do we provide? We provide unified orchestration, a single pane of glass for managing all keys. Management can mean, for example, setting company-wide policies on key rotation and how long keys have to be and who has access. You should be able to do that from one place for everywhere. If you have to go log into 15 different management consoles to change a policy, that's going to be time-consuming and error-prone. Yes?
This kind of circles back to the beginning of what you talked about, basically the scientific perspective to kind of like the enterprise perspective, right? That people kind of like already understand their problem if they work in a domain for like 10 years. How did you go from like, what do you suggest for someone that has the scientific minds to directly go to kind of like the company perspective of kind of like trying to identify the problem to solve in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess you made kind of like the transition through experience. How do you get the experience in the first place, right?
So there are a couple of solutions to that. One is you just have to go through the process, but knowing ahead of time that you need to go through that process will help you rather than learning from experience only. The second thing is to partner with someone with the right business expertise. I think it's critical that if you're a scientific co-founder, you should have someone with the appropriate business experience. I say appropriate because in the beginning, we took people who had completely wrong experience because we didn't know what's the difference, right? You're a business person and you're a business person. That's what I like saying. What do? You have a PhD? Oh, so you must be like that. I have a friend who's a biologist, or even worse, I have a friend who's a historian. So it's the same thing as you, right? You do the same thing. No, I mean, it's a completely different world. They have nothing to do with each other, right? Nothing bad against historians. I mean, it's different work. I wasn't saying it's less. I think it's different, completely different. So you need someone from that field who has the experience and who understands, and then you work together where you provide your insights on what the technology can solve, and they provide the insights on what the world needs, and you go and explore based on that. Because the chances are they won't have a good enough understanding of the technology to know what you can really solve. Things which are very obvious to us. Oh, yeah, we can do that. Oh, no, that's going to be impossible. For them, it's very difficult. And in the same way, we don't understand what the world needs, and they may not understand. They need to do the research, but this is, together, it's a much better solution. So we had this unified way of doing everything, and this was the Unbound core platform. You had a virtual HSM, just like a virtual machine, provide a solution running on any hardware. The virtual HSM was the way to consume cryptography wherever the keys sat. So you would be using the same API. It could be any of the common libraries, but it would be one entry point wherever the key, and the system would route the key, route the operation to be to a cloud HSM or a physical HSM or to a KMS or to our key store, which was run in MPC. We also talked about secure enclaves when we never got there. So where we want to put your keys is fine, but we're going to give you the benefit of now being able to have a unified access. And likewise, key management, unified key management, one console where you log in using your organization credentials. At the time, if you wanted to log into AWS to manage your keys, you needed to use a username password. You weren't able to use OpenID Connect. I don't know what it is today, but at the time, that was the case. So we're providing an immediate solution to organizations to the fragmentation of the cryptographic space, and also with a vision going forward, they'll be able to get rid eventually of their hardware in a gradual way, because once everything is from a unified API, now when my HSM needs to be deprecated, I can just move that key across to the new system. And on top of that, different applications that we had integrations to so that you could run all of that over this platform. A very, very different perspective from what we started with, but one that actually resonated with the market and was very successful until Coinbase came along and acquired us and got rid of everything except for the cryptocurrency stuff. But fine, it's nevertheless a very good story. So we did have a slide about the technology, but it came at the end. So after we've talked about all the benefits and everything there, here's the technology. You can split keys, it's never combined, but what are the benefits? The benefits are as follows. Support cloud migration and adoption, same key store for every environment. Cryptography at the edge where applications are. It's not hardware, so I can put the software right at the edge where the applications are and get better time. Built-in high availability and disaster recovery. It's software, you don't need to buy multiple hardware boxes. Fully virtualized, particularly suited for zero trust environments. These are benefits that resonate with them, not generic security, better security statements. Okay, so I'm going to finish this part of the talk with one more slide talking about the challenges of being a scientist co-founder, which starts with with your question. One question you have to first ask is, is that what you want to do? Are you going to try and continue in academia or research, or are you going to be a full-time co-founder? Doing both is an absolute nightmare from experience. But it's a very important decision, and it's very, very hard to truly do both. By the way, I was sure that, okay, so we do this company, there's a finite number of cryptographic primitives we need to support. I need to do RSA, I need to do ECDSA, maybe ECIS, I need to do AES with different modes of encryption. Once I've done that, I'm done, right? This is the full API. So I was pretty sure I'd work for 6 months or so writing these protocols, write a document, and then, yeah, okay, every now and then it's more. It never ends. It's the same thing in Coinbase, by the way, right? So, okay, so what's the problem? Multiparty ECDSA, EDDSA, backup, you're done. But the world moves very, very quickly, and actually there was always too much work to do. The second question is, what's my role as a scientist in a business environment? And this is a very, very important lesson that I learned, and I was burned very badly for not knowing this lesson from the beginning. Scientists have much too much respect for experience and expertise. Because that's what we are in science, right? If you're in this room, you shouldn't be asking me a question about zero knowledge, because there are people in this room who know much more about zero knowledge than me. You'll ask the person with the most expertise. If it's MPC or the stuff that at least I've researched, you'll ask me, because we'll go to the person who's the biggest expert. And if you're not an expert, if you do come and ask me about zero knowledge, what will I tell you? Go ask someone else. Why are you coming to me? That's not what I do, right? You're asking the wrong person. So you're a scientist and you're in a business meeting and you're asked, what do you think? Who should our target market be? Who should we be targeting to sell to? And what are you going to answer? I don't know. What are you asking me that for? I have no idea. I've never done this before. I don't know anything about that. Leave me alone. And that's what I did for a number of years. And it's a huge mistake because as a co-founder, A, you need to give input, and B, you actually can give input. You just need to take the effort to learn about it. And you can't, it's not legitimate to take the excuse of, this is not my area of expertise, because it's the joint thinking of the different people in the room with the different perspectives that will give the best benefit. Another problem is science is not used to making decisions based on partial data. So should we target banks or should we target large technology companies? So the answer is very simple, right? Go do a survey and come back with concrete data and I'll tell you. But no, we don't have data. So how you ask me to make a decision based on no data? I mean, I understand when I get married, I don't have enough data, I have to make that decision, but this is a business decision, just go and do the work. No, there isn't enough. You're continually making decisions based on very, very partial information. You have to get used to doing that. And it's very painful in the beginning because it's not a muscle that we have. You also have to learn to manage people and manage tasks. That's a whole other talk, but I think academics are terrible at managing tasks. Project management, task management, they're typically terrible at that. Nobody teaches them to do that, and it's very unfortunate. It's something you have to learn how to do, to prioritize properly, to also learn how to manage people, which is something that we're not used to doing because we never managed people beforehand. So they're part of the challenges, but it all can be learned. It's a painful process. I had an executive coach for a number of years when I became CEO, because then I had to learn all of these things like straight away. And it was still a very painful process. But in the end, it all worked out, so I was happy. Okay, before I go to the next part, any questions?
So the executive coaches helped you with the managing part, or
With
some
the
of other
which?
things too?
The executive coach helps you to, gives you someone who you can voice what you're feeling, your challenges, what's painful to you, who's independent. So you have often advisors on your board, but sometimes you have to be careful exactly what you say to them. You want to be transparent, but they're, when you're feeling really crap and actually would just rather quit and walk away because you've had enough, it's not something you really want to say to your board member. Okay, you do want to tell them what problems you're having in the company, but you don't want to tell them that, for example. External advisors can also do that for you. But also, they can also give you concrete information, like, I'm not happy with management meetings. I'm not happy with how they're run. So, it's someone you can talk through with. Another thing that I did was reading, but there are all these management books, right? You have this person who succeeded with a startup and writes a management book. Most of those I didn't really like. It's a 150-page book. You could, in 3 pages, you probably get the idea. And it's anecdotal experience, so I didn't really identify with it very much. Some of them helped a little bit, most didn't. But HBR, Harvard Business Review, has these booklets of papers of all different things. So we'll talk about management styles, and what it'll give you 4 different management styles and how they work, and the different management styles that different people have, and the advantages and disadvantages. For me, those sort of things worked because I could look and understand and sort of more formalize the way I was operating. So I would read a lot. I actually read a lot of those different things. I would discuss with my executive coach, and I would try this and then try that. Some things are a continual battle. Making management meetings relevant and useful was a continual battle. But sometimes it was better and sometimes it was worse. Yeah.
So it sounds like with your value proposition, for the most part, it sounds defensive in the sense that ideally a customer comes to you with a problem already and you say you can save them money, right? I was just wondering if you have any insight on how to sell to like a customer who's looking to maybe like make money, or how to change that perspective.
Not saving the money.
Okay.
Business enablement is a very, very big one. Most of the time, we didn't try to save money. Because we were targeting sophisticated organizations, our price point was not low. In fact, in the beginning, if you're just buying a little bit of us, we're probably more expensive than buying another HSM. Because if you're selling to sophisticated high-end customers and you have a very, very low price, right? It's like someone selling you a Gucci T-shirt for $7. You're not sure, right? It doesn't sound right. But business enablement, or it depends exactly what the benefit is. Like, here's a new regulation that you need to solve, or you need to go to the cloud, or many other things, or you have a lot of pain in managing this infrastructure, which is what we ended up with, and here we can solve that for you. But each startup will find, or each solution will have to find what it is that the benefit is, and it's certainly not always saving money. Sometimes it is, but not always. We didn't save anyone money.
Okay. So how did you know where to price your services? Or
Pricing
products?
is extremely hard. Extremely hard and extremely painful. You don't want to leave money on the table, so you start with outrageously high, and then you go down, but at some point you have to get to it always bothered me a lot. Like customers say, okay, so how much does it cost? And then the salespeople would start saying, well, it depends what you want to do. Explain to us your use case, what you're using it for, then we'll come back with the price. And I say, I don't understand. Tell me how much it costs. But it really doesn't work that way. In the end, we got to a model which was very different. In the beginning, we tried to copy the HSM model. But we're software and they're hardware, it doesn't make sense. We come up with a different model. We're continually changing and adjusting. If you're a better anomaly detection, you can look around at the existing prices, but list prices are very, very far from what people actually pay anyway. This is one of the biggest challenges. If you're selling to customers, not to businesses, then it's easier because you can see what people are paying for similar things, and you can also play around with it. You can take it up and take it down and see what effects you have But in the beginning, with enterprise sales, the number of customers aren't that huge, so it's a bit more challenging.
Have you seen the effect of popularizing the technology via blog posts or, I don't know, social networks having an effect on sales? Or
So there's something called content-based marketing, which I very much believe in. We use it a lot. I know about social networks, but generating real content that people can consume and it's beneficial to them, I think is important. So if you're selling a code signing solution and there's an attack like that affected that, then explaining the attack, not coming and saying, buy Unbound and we solve your problem, right? That's the bad thing to say. But here, this is what happened. This is an analysis of what happened. These are the sort of solutions that are out there. And one of those solutions is yours. So yeah, it's not unbiased science, but it's a bit like writing your introduction. You do a bit of overselling then as well. But providing content that's actually beneficial is something that we found is helpful and raises your name in the field as well. So it can be blog posts, white papers that are not necessarily always specific about your product, also about your product, but also in general about the field that you're in. That content-based marketing, it resonated with me for sure. So for the second part of the talk, I want to talk about what we do at Coinbase. And it's a very different issues that are arising. And this is more about how do we deploy new technology in a way that's actually safe and secure, and how we not screw everything up, because cryptography is hard. Okay, so just a little bit about the Applied Cryptography Group, or ACG, at Coinbase. What is our mission? You can say it's to deploy or ensure state-of-the-art, best-in-class cryptographic deployment at Coinbase. We want to provide best usability and service to customers while maintaining that security. We also want to establish Coinbase as a leader in the field. And we want to pull the field ahead so that the field in general is better. A breach for any organization is bad for Coinbase. Coinbase is not happy when some other exchange is breached. It's not like, yeah, so now come and use Coinbase. This is bad in general for the field, and therefore Coinbase would prefer for everybody to be secure. The Applied Cryptography team, which is the team that I run, is a product-driven research team, which means that we're not looking around for what research we can do which we think may be relevant to the organization. Rather, we're always getting incoming requests for solutions, and we have to provide them. And often, right now at least, and has been this way for the last 2.5 years, we have more requests than we can fulfill. And that's a healthy thing. And also, I actually really enjoy it. It's nice. Like, you're given real-world constraints and a real problem that needs to be solved, and you have to go ahead and solve that problem. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. How do we do that? Well, we work very closely with product to define the requirements, engineering, and the security team. We're actually now part of the security team, but I mean security in general, which will audit our solution, the security of our solution, as well as look at the general security posture of the organization. Every deployment that we have will include the following things: a cryptographic design, which is really a high-level description of the problem we're solving. Because you'll sit with a product person, they'll explain the problem. We want to make sure we're aligned and we don't spend a lot of time designing some complex protocol which actually isn't what they needed in the first place. Then we need to build the theoretical solution. If it already exists, then great. And then we'll validate it. And if not, then we'll have to research it. I'm going to go through each one in more detail separately. Then we write an implementation specification, which will bridge between the theoretical paper and the actual code. So a very explicit, clear specification. And there'll be a review that they match so that the theory matches the specification. We'll then work with the security. There's a security audit team in Coinbase that will audit and verify everything we've done. Then they'll be implemented, and we'll check the implementation matches the specification. There'll be external reviews. Now let's go through each one separately. So the cryptographic design will have a problem statement, a solution outline, and also a security or threat model where relevant. The threat model here, security will often do very big threat models, like looking at all different potential attacks and what can happen. Here it's more the security model of, okay, so if it's MPC and has these parties, then here you have to corrupt. And if you corrupted this, then what would happen, to get a clear understanding of what the goals are. The next is theoretical research. So we want to find the best solution for the task, and there are three possibilities. One is you find existing research that completely solves the problem. This is almost never the case. Why is it almost never the case? Because even if you have a protocol, let's say, so we need to do multi-party ECDC. So we have a protocol for that, but it integrates, that is going to be used, for example, in custody in a certain way. How did it integrate with that? How are keys generated, and how are they deployed, and how are they backed up? And how do we get to a point where we're actually running? These systems are much, much more complex, and therefore just the protocol itself is only a part of the solution. But it's an important part of the solution, but it's not everything. And so when that happens, then if you don't have a full solution, then you find an existing solution which is close and you adapt it. And you write whatever, you research whatever is needed in order to make it suit the specific product problem you have. And the last possibility is you need to develop a brand new cryptographic solution. And this can sometimes be quick, because sometimes it's actually easy, and sometimes it can be very complicated and actually take many, many months. So that means we do some guesswork in our team where we think about things that we think we will want to solve in the future. We discuss it with product whether it makes sense to them, and then we'll kick off a long-term research project. So what I'll talk about tomorrow is, for example, one of those projects. Everything and what I'll talk about tomorrow is actually based on real product needs that we may need or would be nice to have. They're not critical right now necessarily, and therefore that's a long-term research project to get there. Once we have done that, then we do the validation, and we don't trust any research paper, and I mean any research paper, including our own. So what that means is that we'll have a full validation, and we'll do it independently within our team. And also there's an internal security audit team in Coinbase who engages with a cryptographer in that team already, but they also engage with external academic cryptographers who will do reviews like you've never seen in any journal that you've ever published in, and it's fantastic. And just one example, we were onboarding someone new about a year ago, and this person asked me, okay, but when I read your paper, like or your research, like what level of, and how much do I need to check what you've done? And what I told them was, you should think of me when you're doing the audit as this very old, senile researcher who all of his good work was done over 20 years ago and really doesn't know what he's talking about anymore. And what I told her was, don't trust me for anything. You need to check every single step. We're very, very paranoid about this. And for the very simple reason is we're not protecting passwords for your login to your university email. All right? We're protecting billions and billions of dollars. So making a mistake is not something which is an option. It doesn't mean nothing is perfect, right? But the level of a mistake has to be something. We can't afford to have a major flaw in the protocols we deploy. Our research philosophy, because of that, is a very, very conservative one. So we prefer mature results. So I'll talk to you about your 3-round ECDC. We want to start thinking about that. When you first published it, it wasn't relevant then. We want to wait, we want to do full validation, but we want something to have some time. We want to have time to analyze and look at it. We're not running to adopt everything brand new off the shelf. Full rigorous proofs always. And if the proof is not rigorous enough, that's fine. Or if we don't feel we understand it well enough, we'll just rewrite the entire proof from scratch. We prefer simplicity wherever possible. So if you're improving by 10%, but it's much more complex, either in the protocol or in the proof, we probably won't do it. If it's much, much faster and there's a product need for it, then yes, we may well adopt it, but we will prefer simplicity where we can, both in the proof and in the design. Assumptions, we prefer, like the most extreme assumptions that we use are pair and DDH. Doesn't mean that you can't use anything else, right? For example, if you're doing a protocol for BLS, then obviously you can use pairings because BLS uses pairings. But I would rather not use pairings, for example, to solve Schnorr or something like that. We wouldn't do that. We prove security under the most stringent definition, UC security, so security under concurrent composition. And even if that means we have to pay a penalty for that, like using the Fichten transform for UC zero knowledge, we have a paper which we published about that recently, we will certainly do that. And we will accept the random oracle. We can argue about whether that's reasonable or not, but yes, we accept the random oracle, we do not accept the generic group model. And the distinction we make is very simple. When SHA-256 is designed, it's designed to look random looking, whereas elliptic curve points have a very, very specific structure. So no, we don't rely on the generic group model anywhere in any of our protocols. Doesn't mean we won't ever in the future if there's something which we absolutely have to. It's the only way we can solve the problem, but we don't. We certainly don't want to. Implementation specification is a massive gap between a paper and an implementation. Papers can be written in a very modular way and very abstract. So layers upon layers and maybe refer to other things. And this is very, very hard to come along and implement without a good understanding of it. Obvious checks are often omitted. So do you always write in your paper check that this is what you got is a valid elliptic curve point? Probably not. Should you or not? I don't know, but often you will omit that. Many things are not explained. Yeah, we have a random oracle onto the elliptic curve. Okay, so maybe I can do h of m times g. No, that's not a random oracle onto the elliptic curve because you know the discrete log. That would be a complete disaster for protocols that use a random oracle onto the elliptic curve. You have to fully specify all of these things. What needs to go into the Fiat-Shamir hash? Everything has to be fully specified. The majority of this is clear to a cryptographer, certainly clear to a cryptographer who's fully read in full detail the entire paper, and not just the protocol, by the way. I've certainly screwed up in the past by reading only the protocol and a bit beforehand and afterwards and trusting and then realizing that, oh, they meant an unknown order group and not a prime order group. Shit, messed it up completely. So yeah, when you're an expert cryptographer, you can read everything, you can understand, and then write the specification, but somebody else just coming and reading that will be a complete disaster. So this is a central step in the process. Again, we write them, this is verified by someone else in our team who didn't write it. It's then verified again by the security team who will compare the theory to the specification and make sure that everything matches. We also have system specifications which tie the different protocols together, and they're also verified in the same way. So here's just an example. On the left-hand side, you have a protocol in a paper for Feldman VSS. This is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it. But this on the right-hand side is the PVSS verify function, which sort of is a little part of this, which shows how you verify exactly that everything is correct in that publicly verifiable secret sharing. Okay, and so this is it called, you can see things like, verify the UCZK batch DL. We have calls to random oracle, calls to all different things. These are all very well specified in all of our documentation. It's then implemented by a team called Security Platform Engineering. There are engineers there with 25 years experience implementing cryptography and 9 years experience implementing MPC. There aren't many people out there with that level of experience. Then there's a code review independently, again, by people in our team. 2 of our cryptographers actually know how to read code. Not me. And they do 1 level of code review, and then again, it's additionally reviewed by the security team. That review now ignores the theory and just checks that the code matches the specification. So you have an independent check that the specification matches the theoretical paper, and then independent review that the code matches the specification. And then after you've done all of that, there's also an external code and cryptographic review, for example, by like NCC group or something like that as well. Preferably with people who actually understand MPC and cryptography, which is true of them, just as an example. So this is the way the result looks. I don't think you can really see this, but this is like a page we have in Confluence, which shows each of the specifications, basic primitives, constant time module multiplication, zero knowledge proofs, verifiable secret sharing, TDH truth threshold encryption, quorum backup, garbled circuits, MPC-friendly key derivation, or all different stuff. And then for each one, you'll have a theoretical paper, a specification, and a design document where relevant. And then this is really, really complicated. There are so many different moving pieces, and update the spec. How do we know that everything is updated correctly? So this has to be tracked. We're building an automatic tool, but you can see a very, very rigorous process where we have an Excel, which is the latest spec theory version which has been updated, the latest specification which has been updated, what has been reviewed, what has been implemented, what version was implemented, and we track and make sure that all of these things are always up to date before anything is rolled out for actual production. It's not a formal spec. It is, if I go back to here, but it's not a like words like choose, random, or check that everything is valid. It's much more exact. It's pseudocode, and the text below is like these are like clarifications. But
do you include session IDs, for example, in the spec?
Yes,
that level of detail.
Of course. Additional activities that we do, we provide cryptographic support across the company. We do some offensive research internally and externally. Our offensive research externally is more like if we find a bug somewhere else, we want to understand that and make sure that, so we can, for ourselves, and also to improve the security posture for the field. We're not very interested in making very noisy black hat presentations. And one last thing I want to say is that Coinbase is very much about defense in depth. And I think we have a very good cryptography team at Coinbase, but there's an amazing security team. So MPC tells you as long as you don't corrupt, a full quorum of parties, then you can't learn anything. But that doesn't mean that we then say, okay, so as long as we have reasonable security around those parties, we're okay. Each machine is incredibly locked down. If there's a machine that's only used for delivering messages and according to the theory, they don't need to be trusted at all, they'll be completely locked down and nobody can access that machine. If anybody accesses that machine, it will tell the whole world. Very, very strong security posture, an amazing security team. And that gives us defense in depth so that we can, nothing is perfect. We're certainly not perfect. And even though we have, I think we have the most rigorous process in industry. I don't think anybody comes close to, at least not I've heard of. And I still don't think that it's perfect. So having defense in depth and knowing that security has our back is very, very important to us as well. And therefore, they're a crucial part of the overall security and very important partner in our development process.
The specification process that you mentioned, did you kind of like port that over from the startup experience, or was that kind of like less rigorous?
We ported it over, but we've improved by an order of magnitude. So yes, in the startup, we had specification. The specifications were not as exact as they are today. We didn't have all of the as much independent review. We did reviews as well, but not as much independent review. So I would say, yes, it's the same idea. We started with those types of processes, but we're now orders of magnitude more rigorous about it. And we didn't have, of course, at Unbound, we didn't have the security team that would do all of both the defense in depth, but, well, that was different because we were selling software to companies and they did their defense in depth. But we also didn't have this internal, external organization that was auditing us and working with us the whole way through. We did do external reviews. For example, Victor Shoup did a review on all of our protocols, so we certainly had that as well, but it wasn't to the same level that we have now.
Do you go all the way down to implementing elliptic curve arithmetic and finite field arithmetic, or? So
we don't, but sometimes as software engineers do. So in general, my belief is don't implement low-level cryptography. But we have a software engineer who's extremely strong, and sometimes you have a reason to. For example, we use OpenSSL, and it turned out that the ED 25519 operations are not constant time in OpenSSL. So he rewrote that as an example, and also came out 30% faster than OpenSSL and constant time. So sometimes it's done, but we typically do it only when we need to.
With your experience, what's the future of MPC, general MPC? Like, there is so much work on FHE, and every time I hear about all these people working on FHE, I question the wisdom of that versus, because even with FHE, you're gonna end up to use some MPC on the back to store the keys, right?
Yeah.
So, and I understand that it's just for the decryption, but
so I think there are two different questions you're asking here. One, I'll start with the second one about FHE. Come on, we did MPC 25 years ago, and it was completely irrelevant. It was unclear that anybody would care. And the things we thought about, like auctions or stuff, like, I don't know, who would even care? Like, it was unclear that anybody would care. It was unclear that it would ever be efficient enough for use in practice. But that process that we went through of slowly making it more efficient. So I think on a research side, it's very valid.
No, I'm not questioning the research side. I'm saying, but that there was no other option. With FHE, there is another option, right?
Yeah, but there are use cases where non-interactiveness is helpful. So in a use case where non-interactiveness is helpful, then FHE that's the way I explain. The way I explain FHE versus MPC, when you can't have interaction, just use MPC. It'll always be faster. When interaction is a problem and you want something to be done without interaction, that's when you use FHE. So what are the use cases for MPC in general or FHE? This is a very hard question. There are startups out there that are working on this, Duality, Pyte. There are some others that are looking to deploy MPC for privacy type applications. Not necessarily personal privacy type applications, but more interaction between organizations. The work has to be done, like making that something which, for the industry to be aware that this solution exists and to deploy that, someone has to go and actually do that work. In Unbound, when we started, no one knew about MPC at all, and certainly not for key protection. Now, there are organizations out there and then someone reached out to me and said, are there these types of solutions out there? We're looking for one. So that work has to be done, and where it'll end up, it's unclear. I can give you the same list of pretend applications we were talking about in academia for many years, and I'm 99% sure that we're wrong about all of those. Where the actual benefit will come from, if, it's still an if, right? That's something that it's only someone doing the market research, trying to sell, getting the feedback, going to different organizations, time and time and time again, with investors that have the patience to allow that market exploration, that's where success will happen. Without it, I don't see it happening at all.
How do you ensure that your implementation adheres to the specification? Is that something that...
That's, again, a separate step. We have a step where we compare the specification to the theory, and a second step where we compare the specification to the code. There are different people that do that. So all of those reviews are done internally by our team, and in addition by the Coinbase security team, and in addition afterwards an external review, but that's probably more just looking for attacks than doing a thorough review. And if the specifications are written well, then they can do that. So for example, on the code review, there's someone actually whose familiarity with cryptography is not great, and they do excellent reviews. So sometimes the comments will be ones that we don't care about, like they'll say things like, the specification says that the order of the elements in the hash function for fiat shamir is Q followed by R, and they wrote R followed by Q. So then we'll tell them, we don't care about that, that's fine, but they're able to do very, very good pattern matching, and that gives us very good confidence. Thank you very much.